Howdy, this is Group 11 presenting Shostakovich's Symphony Number 5. The members in our group include Abe Perlotta, Brandon Dalton, Brittany Vrooman, Guadalupe Rosas, Jake Straker, John Olney, myself Monty Pandya, Matthew Semrick, Ryan Brackett, and Grant Newbeck. This is the example of Shostakovich's Symphony Number 5. So who is Dmitri Shostakovich? Dmitri is a Russian composer born on September 25th, 1906 in St. Petersburg, Russia. Born the middle child of three, his parents were Dmitri Shostakovich and Sofia Kokolina. He was involved in multiple orchestras, string quartets, preludes, and fugues for piano, operas, ballet concerts, and films. However, he is most popular by the 15 symphonies which he wrote in his late 20s, which became useful for orchestras around the world. Even though he was vividly popular, his fame quickly fell upon the release of Lady Macbeth, the opera, and condemned for his work, saying it corrupted the Soviet spirit. The historical context. Dmitri Shostakovich was a pianist and composer who, in the early 1930s, was revered as a Russian musical genius. At the young age of 21, Shostakovich had won various piano competitions and composed multiple operas and symphonies. His latest to that point, which had already been running for 2 years, was entitled Lady Macbeth of the MUSC district. Around the same time, the notorious Joseph Stalin of the USSR had become quite accustomed to attending musicals and plays. That is until he saw Shostakovich's piece. Shortly after Stalin caught a showing, an article appeared in Pravda, the country's official newspaper, wrote several slam pieces aimed at his work, calling it the mutal instead of music, and denouncing Shostakovich as a formalist. These public statements stripped off professional support and friends, and anticipating the worst, Shostakovich allegedly kept a packed suitcase under his writing desk as he attempted to create a new music in an atmosphere of isolation and fear. But his worst fears were yet were yet to be unfolded as the arrest, exile, and death of many powerful patrons and family members ensued. Shostakovich was forced to withdraw the premiere of his Symphony No. 4, but still continued to compose. Meanwhile, Stalin and his officials awaited the debut of his Fifth Symphony to see if Akasin Shostakovich had reformed and written music according to their dictates. Against this backdrop of persuasive political terror and personal attack, Shostakovich had to find a way to write his Symphony No. 5, scheduled to premiere November 21st, 1937.
So for some political background, Shostakovich, although not politically active in his youth, had written letters that demonstrated his support for communism. He's quoted by saying, "February and October revolutions stirred vehement emotions in our family." Although feelings were created in his family, this was at a young age and in his first attempts at composition. As time went on, his support for communism still remained, but support became something less than voluntary. In his 1928 composition, was flayed by the media for being too esoteric. Shostakovich was rarely able to get around the restrictive influence placed by the censoring government. In fact, the same year that Symphony No. 5 was published, Mosolov, a fellow composer, was executed. As time progressed, Shostakovich became more and more against the communist regime, and as his rights were impeded and his fellow composers and citizens became oppressed. So the genre of his work, Shostakovich's Symphony No. 5 was a classical symphony written in 1937. He is one of the more notable composers in this genre for having composed 15 symphonies and 6 concertos. This was composed in the modern era of classical music, which is characterized by dissonance, aleatoric music, the use of prepared pianos, sprechtentheme, and musical use of non-instruments.
Theme and meaning. First movement, Moderato non troppo. There are 3 sections, and those are exposition, development, and recapitulation. Symphony opens with a strenuous strengthening figure in canon, initially leading and falling in minor sixths, then the minor thirds. First theme, the violin plays it. The second theme is built out of octaves and sevenths. The movement ends with the celesta playing a rising figure and slowly fading away. Second movement, allegretto. Movement begins in A-B-A form. Movement opens with a heavy, loud introduction followed by a softer solo on the E-flat clarinet. We get to the trio section where the harp, violin, and cello are the 3 voices, then the trio instruments move to the strings, flute, and bassoon. In the recapitulation section, some of the material heard earlier on in the movement is played again, but soft and short, compared to the loud and long style used at the start. Third movement, largo. The first section is a very sad, sharp moment, and then it becomes more aggressive. The melody is very long, it is poignant, and then it becomes more aggressive on long notes. Fourth movement, allegro non troppo. Melodies are expanded until the new theme is played by the trumpets. The new theme is passed on to the strings and then the horn. There's a march section where the themes are played like a funeral dirge. The music builds and builds until they get to the point where the piece is going to change from a minor key into a major key. This is a symbolization of good defeating evil. The political message. Symphony No. 5 was written at the height of Stalinism around 1937. This was a time when millions of Soviet people were forced to be relocated, exiled, and possibly killed. During the time leading up to the debut of the piece, Shostakovich was already in hot water. Stalin disapproved of Shostakovich's Lady Macbeth of Mtsensk district, and Shostakovich was made very aware of this. When he wrote Symphony No. 5, he had to appear to adhere to Stalin's demands, but was able to weave in sardonic truth that portrayed a testimony to the despair and terror that was over the nation. At the opening, there's a battle among the lower and upper strings. This represents the hopelessness and oppression of the people. Towards the finale, the structural tie to the opening of the performance is exposed. The overall symphony has a pattern of a decisive statement and apprehensiveness. It is obvious that Shostakovich was forced into a position to perform something that Stalin wanted, but he was still able to convey his real message.
Political influence. A major factor in Shostakovich's symphony was the oppression and censorship for the government forced on musical composers. Having to abide by the RAPM's Russian Association of Proletarian Musicians rules, which were dictated by Stalin, made Shostakovich want to steer further from the government's goals. Shostakovich worked tirelessly to be able to produce music that would not create any popularity, as it was against the government's ideology. I cannot think of my further progress apart from the socialist structure, and the goal that I set for my work is to contribute at every point toward the growth of our remarkable country. Evasive statements similar to the ones above allowed Shostakovich's music to be published while still making cries for rebellion in his compositions. Social influence. Despite statements by Shostakovich stating he was pro-communism in his later works, his music was quoted to have brought audiences to tears because they understood the underlying theme of the music and the oppressive regime they were governed by. The overall impact of the symphony was intense. According to Shostakovich himself, audiences filed out of concert halls silently because the message of the music was so powerful. Here are the contributions of each member of our group. And here is our works cited page. Thanks, Anne Gigum.